let me, you made an interesting thing about Hitler, and I'm not going to say that Hitler was an atheist. He certainly wasn't a Christian. But
he said he was in public and in private, and was supported by the Catholic Church, and they ran around with Gottman Unz on their belt buckles.
Oh, well, that is hilarious. That's like all the American congressmen who say that they believe in God, or in God we trust. It's like that's like saying that every American is a Christian because you have "In God we trust" on your dollars or whatever. Look, you're not debating like a third-year school kid. Yeah, that is. I'm sorry, but you can't get away with that. Gottman Unz on it. You do know that was the motto of the whole German army.
I do understand that, but you also know that Hitler espoused his Christianity both publicly and privately, and used his Christianity as justification for his views.
Yes, and would you like to give me an example of that? Because I can explain that. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is my period, and if you want to go ahead with this, go ahead. Tell me, sure. Give me an example.
A quote that he had about secular schools can't be tolerated because such schools have no religious instruction, and a general moral instruction without a religious foundation is built on air.
Yes.
Consequently, which sounds exactly like what you're saying. As a matter of fact, if I hadn't attributed this to Hitler, I don't know that it would be different from your position.
Yeah, but except this, Matt, as you should know, as any historian should know, and you're talking about comparing things, if you make a statement without a context, it just becomes a pretext. Do you know where Hitler said that, by the way? And do you know when he said it? And do you know to whom he said it?
I don't know to whom. I know it was during negotiations which led to the Nazi-Vatican Concord.
He said it in 1933, before he had his final election where he was going to be elected Chancellor. He was speaking to the Catholic Teachers Union before he had his Concordat. And of course, as a politician, he's going to stand up and say, I'm supporting Catholic schools. Of course he was going to say that. He's a politician. For you to take that and say this is evidence of Hitler's faith, I'm sorry, but that's ludicrous from a historical point of view and from a logical point of view.
I don't get to decide who is or isn't a true Christian, and I'm certainly not going to get into a battle of determining that, because I don't see that anybody gets to decide who is or isn't a true Christian. I'm just saying, and we decided, I thought earlier, that we weren't going to go down this route of whether Hitler was an atheist or not. His positions, he publicly and privately represented himself as a Christian. And when somebody does that, since I don't get to say, oh, no, you're not really a Christian, I'm stuck with how they self-represent themselves. You asked me earlier to put myself in the mindset of someone in that time, in that era, which is, once again, you appealing to moral relativism, as if just because it's their mindset, it's factual, and that precludes the possibility that people can be wrong about their moral opinions, which is
absolutely.
I don't think you'll find any argument from David on that, though.
Absolutely, they can be wrong about their moral opinions, but I'm finding it, the combination of, maybe it is your fundamentalist background, but the naivety in what you're saying. Charles Manson says, "I'm a good person and kind." Do you accept that? No, you don't. You look at the evidence, you look at the context, and so, yes. For example, you're talking about Hitler and Gott mit uns and all that kind of rubbish that people put in. I can give you numerous evidence. For example, all the German airmen who were captured over Britain during the Second World War were interviewed. Admittedly, they were interviewed by a bishop, and he went round and he asked each one of them what their faith was in, what they believed. And something like 40% of them said their faith was in Hitler, something like 10% of them said they believed in God, and the rest of them said that they were atheist. Now, yes, but I'm not. That doesn't prove anything from my part. But what I find really, really fascinating in all of this, and for me, the main thing, the social Darwinianism. Let me give you a quote from Hitler, from his actual secretary. He said this: "Science isn't yet clear about the origins of humanity. We are probably the highest stage of development of some mammal which developed from reptiles and moved on to human beings, perhaps by way of the apes. We are a part of creation and children of nature, and the same laws apply to us as to all living creatures. And in nature, the law of the struggle for survival has reigned from the first. Everything incapable of life, everything weak is eliminated. Only mankind, and above all the church, have made it their aim to keep alive the weak, those unfit to live, and people of an inferior kind." Now, I would argue, when I look at the different philosophies and the different worldviews, an atheistic worldview either ends up completely illogical or complete hubris or complete madness, where the Christian worldview, for me at least, makes sense of morality and evil. Do you actually accept there's such a thing as evil?
As a thing?
No.
Good
as
and
a
evil
concept, even.
Good and evil are labels that we apply to situations, to consequences, in comparing them to particular values. Now, let me back up a second, because when you say Charles Manson says he's a good person and it's absurd to just take him at his word, that's because we have a definition and an understanding of good, and we can evaluate his actions in comparison to good. If somebody tells me they're a Christian, we don't have a good understanding of what is or isn't a Christian, or what acts a Christian could or couldn't do. And the fact of the matter is, there are plenty of people, if there's anybody who's a true Christian, maybe there are two true Christians who have never done anything wrong, but being a Christian doesn't preclude somebody from doing anything wrong, including murder. And in some cases, the beliefs in the Christian religion can encourage that. I mean, after all, we're talking about a religion that condones slavery, that is led by a God-fueled charge across the Middle East to slaughter everybody except for the chosen people. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. I mean, these are pronouncements that are coming directly from the Bible. And while I can't say that somebody is or isn't a true Christian, I can say whether or not there's something in the Bible that might direct them to do something that we would identify as evil, clearly evil.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, you basically you handed me a rope to hang you every time you speak, because you keep saying comparison. And what comparisons are we making? I mean, first of all, the question I'll come back to you. I want to make something, but the question I want to come back to you is the definition of good, because you say we know what good is. How do we know what good is? What if people have different definitions of good? And for you to say we don't have a good understanding of Christian. Yes, we do. We have a great understanding of Christian. And I mean, the rest of the wee rant about slavery and slaughtering across the Middle East, I'm really surprised for a guy who does this for a living, or a guy who does it seriously. But that is a caricature of both the Old Testament and New Testament. But I absolutely know what a Christian is.
I'm glad you do, and so does everybody else who makes assertions about who is and isn't a true Christian.
Yeah, but I mean, we're back to your original philosophy that no one can actually say anything or mean anything. We're just left with this relativistic world where whatever you say is true because you've got nothing to compare it to, or whatever anyone else says. We do know what a Christian is. There are basic standards that you work by. I know that Hitler wasn't a Christian. Why? Because a Christian is someone who follows Jesus Christ. We'll do that in the next program. But let me tell you this. Jesus Christ was a Jew. Hitler would have slaughtered him as a Jew. There's no way that Hitler was a Christian. And I've read all of Hitler's private diaries that we've been able to get, even the fake ones. I've read all of Hitler's speeches. And it seems to me that what you're just doing is picking up on one or two things.